A scientist from the University of Maine has been chosen for a rare honor. Dr. Robert Steneck will be inducted into the prestigious American Academy of Arts and Sciences, an organization that began at the time of the American Revolution.
Steneck describes himself as a marine ecologist and oceanographer. 207's Don Kerrigan has known him for years and says Bob Steneck's research has had a major impact on Maine's fishing industry.
50 years after he first came to the University of Maine as a grad student, Dr. Bob Steneck says his latest national award came out of the blue.
What did you think when you got the word?
Well, I was shocked. I was surprised. Apparently, there are people who think that my body of scientific work was sufficient to put me up for this.
Bob Steneck's scientific work has taken him on and under many of the world's oceans. But his impact on Maine really began right here, a few miles away from the university's Darling Marine Center at the South Bristol Fishermen's Co-op, where he led the research that changed how Maine's biggest fishery is managed.
Well, the Maine Lobstermen's Association, when they had their 50th anniversary, said that I was the first scientist to work with the lobster industry.
But down on the bottom, where lobsters grow, there are still many mysteries.
We first met in the 1980s when he was doing that work.
We want to understand something about the number of lobsters, where they live.
Steneck says he convinced local fishermen to take him out on their boats and talk about what they knew and saw. Then he went under the water to see for himself.
I was getting a sense of how lobsters were behaving and how they change over their lifespan from when they're babies to when they get to harvestable size and beyond.
Diving over and over again to study the sea bottom, even using a submarine to look in deeper water. The results, he says, challenged the state's fisheries regulators.
I said, gee, I'm seeing a lot of lobsters, and he said, no, you're not. Our models are suggesting they're really on the decline. And I said, no, I'm not talking about models. I'm actually seeing a lot of lobsters on the bottom, and this is...
Were they hostile to your
they
work?
They were very hostile early on.
The lobstermen, he says, welcomed that work.
At the time, there was a single index used to determine whether lobsters were overfished, egg per recruit model. And the lobstermen were convinced it was wrong, but at every public hearing, they were ignored.
Steneck says the research team was literally counting lobsters on the bottom and looking for the tiny baby lobsters, and that gave the data to prove fishermen were right.
Along with my then student Rick Wally, who actually figured out where baby lobsters settle. We could monitor how many baby lobsters are coming to the seafloor. We made the connections to older lobsters, and then we started realizing that that's an early warning system, figuring out whether lobsters are increasing or decreasing.
He says federal regulators at the time thought lobsters were in trouble. Steneck told them they were wrong.
And I can remember coming to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and saying, everything we're looking at, and this is, decades ago, I think we're looking at a population explosion of lobsters.
And that research was proved right. Starting in the early 1990s, Maine's lobster catch began growing to unheard of record levels that only began to drop after 2016. The university's research changed how Maine regulates its lobster fishery.
We have a much better sense of what's going on, and I feel like this ecological approach that I wanted to see installed has been installed.
But studying lobsters in Maine is only part of his work. For decades, Steneck has also been watching very different waters.
I suspect that my nomination to the Academy had nothing to do with my lobster work. Internationally, I'm known for my coral reef work.
He has spent years researching the changes affecting the world's coral reefs in the Caribbean and several parts of the Pacific.
I suspect most of your coral reef work happened in the winter.
It's funny the way that works out, isn't it? Yes.
And he has even continued that work in semi-retirement, looking for clues to understand how endangered coral reefs could recover. And he has a book coming about that reef research. There are other legacies of Bob Steneck's years as a scientist, the human ones. Graduate students like Rick Wally, who also became one of Maine's leading experts on lobsters. And then there is Carl Wilson, a graduate student who made a career doing lobster research for the state and was just sworn in by the governor as Maine's Commissioner of Marine Resources.
There's nothing better than having one of your students be the commissioner.
It is a body of work and a career that have helped Maine and the world to better understand their oceans and the creatures in them. Work that the world is now set to honor.
And the new Maine Marine Resources Commissioner, whom you just saw there, has worked for years doing lobster research for the Department of Marine Resources. He calls Bob Steneck one of the most influential people in his career and said he encouraged him to work directly with fishermen and value their input and participation in research.
What a testament. The ceremony with the American Academy of Arts and Sciences will take place this fall. Steneck will be the first from the university to receive the honor.
Coming up next.